Thank you, Chris. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our panel, Where's the Green Funding Decarbonization Initiatives? I'm Dylan Lockwood, and I'm here with my giant headphones to talk about climate change. As you're listening, feel free to engage with the session in the chat and ask your questions in the question tab, and we'll try to get to them over the course of the conversation. Make sure you're joined in the chat for this session by clicking on it in the agenda section. And with that, we'll get started by talking about something pretty serious here, the threat of climate change, which is we're at a point where that threat is undeniable and obviously requires a massive effort to fix. But the other stark truth is that businesses, especially utilities, cannot be radically altered without a strong business case. So for better or worse, it is crucial to make the case for spending on decarbonization initiatives and communicating business value. And I've got some great folks here to talk with me about that, and I'll let them introduce themselves, starting with Omaya.
Thank you, Dylan. Hi, everybody. My name is Omaya Ahmad. I'm a sustainability policy advisor at Arizona Public Service. I'm in APS, our sustainability department actually just recently jumped units. We went from the environmental wing, we're now in the public policy wing, and that made room for somebody like me. I've been 4 years. Half of that tenure was working in state regulation and the other half in federal. So I've done the regulation gambit. And I actually am here to advise specifically on social and governance policies. So I am very people and process focused. Outside of APS, I am a native of the Desert Southwest, born and raised here. I went to Arizona State University where I got my PhD in sustainability. So my sustainability knowledge is housed in living in a dry, arid, hot landscape, but also with the backdrop of sprawling city centers. So the politics and everything that go along with it, that's where I come from, and that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you. And Michael?
Hi, Michael Conklin. I'm with CenterPoint Energy. I work in government affairs, and I'm also a co-founder of Evolve Houston, which is a nonprofit organization in Houston that seeks to improve air quality and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by tackling the emissions that come from the transportation sector. I came to government affairs from strategic planning and mergers and acquisitions. So I really approach problems with a capital budgeting and valuation perspective. I really like this panel topic because I think that there are a lot of opportunities to be green while being profitable. And you know, as you rightly pointed out, that's the challenge, and excited to talk about it today.
Oh, I'm mute. Sorry, there was a mute. Angel, please go ahead.
My name is Angel Lance. I am the founder of Motive Power. Motive Power is a management consulting company that specializes in utilities. Been involved with various utilities across the US for the last 15 years, chiefly working on project management and change management throughout their capital project infrastructure. Additionally, I am the founder of the Gulch Environmental Foundation, which is an environmental foundation focused on the climate change question and really around carbon management in various different project ways, in addition to finding hopefully some form of partnership with the utilities in general areas to incorporate and drive a larger sense of community and enforcement of really what we do next in the decarbonization effort.
Yeah, there's so many angles to this conversation because it's it's a complicated but urgent problem. So let's just start. Let's just start at the baseline. Omaya, what is APS currently doing for decarbonization, and how could the processes of those projects potentially have been improved by external or internal forces?
So at a macro scale, APS actually at the beginning of this year announced a clean energy commitment, a very forward-thinking ahead of mandates here in Arizona to go 100% clean energy by 2050. That is the biggest decarbonization effort that we're going to undertake, and it's going to go over a 30-year period. Me in particular, outside of that decarbonization effort, and also an important thing to consider with the actual carbon reducing efforts is the humanization factor. And part of that commitment was that we will actually exit our coal generation in 2031. And the human aspect of that is closing those economies for the that plants are located. And our final plant that we're exiting in 2031 is actually located on the Navajo Nation. So actually, I'm really focused on transitioning that community away from coal. That is going to require funding as well, and that's what we're working with. And with that, we're looking at a 10-year horizon. Part of talking about the funding is considering why it is we're looking at transitioning that community. Coal, these mid-century plants are directly responsible for the growth in the desert Southwest. And now that we're going in a different direction that's better for the planet, it is our value to kind of make sure we're taking those communities with us. This is something APS is undertaking and trying not to do alone, because it is something, these communities are actually part of the region and a responsibility of more than just the APS ratepayers. So internally, that process is putting people like me, this is taking a part of my concentration time to find out the solutions. We've put up community transition committees within APS, but then also bringing the players, the correct players to the table to work on this and make sure the dollars are available to offer the community and what. So we're meeting regularly with the Navajo Nation. We know that outside of normal things that we would expect, so retraining for employees, we also need to address economic development. We're naming the coal sites, help them with renewable development for energy independence, transmission rates to the ones that are located on there. All these things are going to cost money. So bringing the players to the table would include, we're a regulated utility. It would be bringing in the State Corporation Commission, the legislative branch, also the executive branch, and the plant co-owners. That we can also pay attention to the cost that's going to come down to the ratepayers at the end. And it is a big undertaking, and our goal is to actually really see this through over time. So no better time like starting right now, now that we have like a 10-year horizon, but just knowing that decarbonization efforts actually have outside of the benefit that we receive from cleaning our air.
Thank you for that, Omaya. And Michael, how about CenterPoint? What are you doing down there?
Thanks, Dylan. CenterPoint is doing a number of decarbonization efforts. We also announced a carbon policy at the beginning of this year, and we set the goals of reducing our operational emissions by 70% by 2035 and reducing customer emissions at the point of customer usage for our gas business, 20 to 30% in the residential and commercial sectors by 2040. And so CenterPoint's a large company, and we've got operations across different fuels. So we've got electric and gas. We've also got operations in various states. So it's sort of like we have to take a different approach depending on where we are. For electricity in Houston, we're a transmission distribution utility, but we have a gas company. We are a fully integrated utility up in Indiana. So some of our goals or plans really include things like retiring coal in Indiana by 2035 and replacing with renewables that have small natural gas backup. We do a lot of work on leak detection and minimizing leaks and related emissions from our gas pipelines. We do, in some places where we don't have an operational footprint, so electric in Houston is an example, we look for ways to work with other things, our fleet vehicles to decarbonize them, or work with our customers through organizations like Evolve Houston and Houston's own climate action plan to try to have a broad decarbonization impact. And those are some of the things that we're working on. We've also announced intentions to sorry, I'm blanking on it. We have a project, a hydrogen project in Minneapolis, and we also have an RNG project in Minneapolis, and we are working on piloting tariffs and infrastructure for RNG in our gas system to try and green our operations that way as well.
Thank you for that. Angel, what kinds of decarbonization projects can utilities look at other than just addressing their generation portfolios? Because you obviously you don't work for utility, but we work with utilities a lot. So what are some of those projects that you're seeing that are positive?
They could be doing a ton of stuff, and in some cases they are, and in some cases less so. I have a laundry list of things that they could be doing in addition to just generation focused like decarbonization efforts. But overarchingly, all of the things that I think I'm about to discuss fall underneath the categorization of really collaborating with their communities. And when I say communities, I mean each other, the different utilities across the US. I mean corporations, large corporations and their part in the energy mix. And then of course, customer base, the people that our utilities service. So that's what I mean by community when I talk about community. Just off the top, there's a series of things around technology that utilities could be doing, adopting technology faster, and then reporting on data outward and being transparent about that data and doing it faster, more in depth, and to their community at large. So an example of that would be that utilities could collaborate on their decarbonization efforts and really learn from each other about what's working and what's not working, and their different geographies, what the requirements are in those areas, or different community requirements, like the one that Omaya described, where she's working with the Navajo Nation. That's different than what would happen in my neighborhood, for example, where there is not a Navajo Nation present. So one thing that they could be doing outside the generation space is working with technology, leveraging data, and sharing information amongst each other, as well as with their large corporation base. For example, I know that many corporations that we all know and love, like Microsoft comes to mind, they have their own data centers, they've got their own backup storage, they've got a lot of different stuff that you would imagine the mighty Microsoft has, right? That they are itching to find a way to integrate back into the grid with. And there are many corporations like that. There's several down in the San Francisco Bay Area I can think of that need a collaboration platform to integrate with the utilities and help drive the answers to the climate change problem more effectively. Man, I could go on for days. But ultimately, there's more than one scope of climate change, right? In terms of utilities, they term them as scopes 1, 2, and 3. And I was like, what is that, right? So I went and looked up scopes 1, 2, and 3. And I think utilities right now are largely focusing on scope 1, which is around generation. And scopes 2 and 3 have to do with their suppliers and their extended community base and how those groups are interfacing with climate change or decarbonization. And so the different types of projects that these folks, utilities in general, could be doing could be leveraging technology, speeding up their collaboration with their community base at large, managing transparent and in-depth data across those different groups, and then focusing on downstream more integrated elements like scopes 2 and 3, which have to do with indirect and supply chain oriented carbon emissions and carbon reduction.
So Omaya, we've talked about how APS is doing is working through that sort of community channel. But I'm interested, sort of, since the topic here is funding decarbonization initiatives, that the whole process of identifying a good project to get into, identifying key stakeholders, securing funding, and then actually like starting to make movement on it. Tell us a little bit about that process and where some of the big bumps are that should probably be addressed.
So we, at a level, we have not yet put boundaries on the range of people that need to be involved. We're still putting out all the feelers for bringing in anybody else that needs to be involved. We are jumping through trying to now really work with plant co-owners and start to set that sort of precedent. Literally just in the last summer, we are making appearances at co-owner meetings and bringing like the utility collaboration front and center. We are a utility. There are other utilities that are actually in our region working with our plants, with these communities, and trying to get them to the table. In the plants that we have left, the coal plants, APS is the majority, if not outright, owner and operator. And so we recognize that we are the precedent setter. We have to set the momentum to get people involved on the utility scale and the co-owner scale. So starting that dialogue with the co-owners, picking projects, examining projects based on our conversations with the other stakeholders, bringing that to them and inviting them in to participate based on their own assessments. So that comes from an intention from the utility area, from us. It's following our commitment, our goals to decarbonization and to doing it the right way and the fair way. So we're really trying to assume that role for the others that we would like to get involved.
What would you, I mean, what's something that you would like to see, what's something that you would like to see change in the space that would help accelerate this process?
We're kind of talking or moving through areas that are a little bit unprecedented right now. So it'd be nice to have a facilitator, like a third-party facilitator that is not us, to help lay groundwork, look for things that we are not the experts in, and to bring that to the group. So we're kind of in the process of looking for that third-party facilitator. Sometimes, in some instances, it comes through from the government agencies. Sometimes it's totally non-government agencies. So it's the extra facilitation is something that would help move it forward, because we can't be a jack of all trades in this endeavor, even though we have a significant component of the endeavor.
Thank you. So Michael, is the process a little different down in Texas with the way that your energy market works? Is the buy-in process for this kind of project work in a sort of different way, or is it more or less the same fundamentals?
Well, I'll say again that CenterPoint is a large company, and while I work in Houston, I'm most familiar with our Houston operations. We work differently and have different types of businesses in various jurisdictions. I will stay with the Houston example because I think it's an interesting one. Here we're a deregulated utility. We do transmission and distribution, which means our operational impact on greenhouse gas emissions is pretty low. So we look for other ways to have an impact. And to talk about how you work with stakeholders to get something done. When you're working in a city like Houston, which is very sort of free market driven, you really need to work in a way where you have broad stakeholder engagement and buy-in, and you seek solutions where everybody wins or enough people win that you can get a project off the ground. It's a unique challenge. It's a lot of fun to be part of it, but stakeholder engagement is really everything. I think that it's a myth that, it's sort of a presupposed idea in the name of this panel that green projects don't make green, they don't make business sense. I think there's a lot of myths around that. I think that in many cases there's more profitable green projects out there than you can shake a stick at. What's needed is vision, alignment between stakeholders, and with those things together, you can get a plan and you can invest and envision your operations and your stakeholders' operations differently. I like that Angel talked about, it's more than just scope 1 emissions. So, coming back to Houston, with Evolve Houston and trying to motivate the cleaning of our air and the reduction of our greenhouse gases through the transportation sector, it's not really a direct output of our own operations that we're trying to mitigate. We're trying to help mitigate, really just the emissions of our customers. So that's very much a scope 3 type of project. Another great one that cost no money at all was we've worked with our supply chain to try to increase greening in our supply chain. For example, one project we recently just piloted, we call it vendor, I'm going to lose the name. Sorry, I'm butchering it. Anyway, it's a vendor clean transportation plan that we are incentivizing. So we've incorporated into our procurement process questions about our suppliers' clean transportation plans. This is not binding. You don't have to have a clean transportation plan to participate. But the question is there, and we're sending the message that it will be there in the future. We're a major buyer in the region. And so we'll just ask, do you have a clean transportation plan? If so, please tell us about it. And if you don't have one, do you plan to have one? And please tell us about when you plan to have one. Through our work at Evolve Houston, where we work with the City of Houston, University of Houston, Shell Energy, NRG Energy, and we've got a whole wave of organizations that are about to come in at the end of this year. Through those organizations, we can take a program like this and say, this is a way that we can impact emissions in the region. Costs no money, you just change your procurement. And we can do that all those organizations as well. So it's a very small thing, costs no money, but you can have a large impact. There are things where you spend a lot of money, but you're also profitable and have a large impact. So I don't want to just talk about free things. But really, all of these things, everything that I've seen be successful, from the formation of Evolve Houston to our RNG pilots, to our renewable energy investments in Indiana, none of that happens without quality engagement with key stakeholder groups, including our customers, including our regulators, including our investors, our communities, the cities within which we do business, the businesses with which we do business. When you can bring all of those people together and unite around a common vision, you can do a lot.
So, Angela, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. So, if the supposition that green projects are, have a harder business case because they're harder to prove value to, if that's not true, is the supposition that utilities are at this moment still somewhat apprehensive about adopting green projects, is that also false? And if it isn't, if it is, then what's sort of the next step to accelerate things? And if it's not, then where's the disconnect?
There's a lot in that question, Dylan.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm going a million miles a minute, but yeah. What do you think?
I'm about to get excited because I love everything that Michael just said. And Omaya too. My stance is that we need to collaborate and work with each other to answer this question. And both of these fine individuals have explained how they're doing that in their different ways. And and I realized, as Michael was talking about the different stakeholders that need to be at the table, first off, I 100% agree with him. And I realized that when I'm thinking about community, I wasn't thinking about regulators, and they're a part of the community as well. So that's an error on my part, right? So all that question that you gave me, Dylan, I mean, what I'm thinking, my initial response, especially to what Michael was saying, is that the thing that we need now is cohesion. We need the right stakeholders at the table. Another stakeholder that is routinely, I guess, dismissed, although Michael mentioned it, is your investors. Like, investors are driving some of this change, and they're the money people, right? They are focused on where they're going to put their money and making sure that they're putting it in places that are going to have an impact on climate change, or are focused on with that lens targeted toward their end objectives. So it is already monetized to quite a degree. So I'm going to agree with Michael in that it's somewhat of a myth that it already isn't. You can't make money doing green projects. I loved an example I heard recently by Home Depot, which I like this example because I think it's really tangible all the way across the different spectrums. For example, they talked about how they got into the green thing because their investors sort of required it. So it was an ROI that they needed to manage to, and that was their driver initially. But then they found that their stakeholder base was much larger than just their investors. It was also the people who were coming into their stores, right? The people going into Home Depot are coming in looking for not only projects that are green oriented, but how is Home Depot affecting the planet around them? And should they put their consumer dollars into Home Depot? Additionally, they found that another set of stakeholders were the people wearing aprons, servicing their customers, and that the people at Home Depot who are their employees want to work for a company that is got the environment in mind, particularly one that has to do with building, which is, you know, an environmental input, similar to the ways that utilities are an environmental input. So I really like the way that, and so those different stakeholders, as well as their executives coming to the table and leading strongly from above, helped to drive their platform to become very aggressive in terms of decarbonization, and also quite speedy. So ultimately, we've got the heart, we've got the mind, we've got the abilities. What we need now is the right people at the table, like Michael was describing, with a vision that is common. Right now, all the utilities are working off of different vision sets. They've got different targeted goals by different timeframes. Now and I don't even know what they are in many cases, right? They change sometimes, and they're not loudly broadcast maybe across our nation. Maybe they're loudly broadcast within the general community that they service. So if we could integrate and collaborate across that platform, and then expedite learning from some other corporations and other industries that are doing exactly what the utility industry aims to do at a much more rapid pace, I think we could really move the needle. I heard somebody talk about how utilities, if they, you know, the pace of change needs to get better. And utilities historically are kind of slow at stuff, right? And they're slow at stuff because they do big things. So like, for example, in the 20s, you know, and 30s, maybe 40s, hydro was a big deal. We were building huge dams. These are monster projects, right? They take a long time, and they are still in existence today. They were done extremely well. In the 70s, we're working on nuclear power plants, also huge projects, right? Very impactful, very slow. You want to get that right, right? But now in the time of today, where renewables and wind and solar move at such a more technologically rapid pace and installation pace than those other huge like infrastructure projects, the utility industry, if they could collaborate and integrate in the ways that I've suggested, they could capitalize on the faster pace of new technologies, adoption of those technologies, and then communication of the effect of those technologies on our greenhouse gas. Did I answer your question, Dylan? I'm not entirely sure.
Well, you've definitely given me a lot to think about in terms of how you actually go about keeping how you go about setting up this channel of information so that people aren't making the same mistakes. People are figuring out what's working and what isn't. Omaya, are you seeing anything with the utilities in your area where that kind of collaboration, that kind of providing information to create a clear picture of how to actually go about doing decarbonization? Are you seeing that among your peers? What is the sort of state of the interutility discourse, for lack of a less buzzwordy phrase?
Of course, yeah, we're definitely seeing it with our peers. We all have, actually, what I'd love to respond to Angel's thing is that collaboration is so important, but also recognizing the diversity of the locations each utility is located in, where what our generation is set up of. Here in APS, we have the largest nuclear facility in the country. And that colors a lot of our clean energy commitment to the future, right? And not everybody has a Palo Verde in their backyard, but there's still so much to learn, and everybody's starting at different spots. Everybody's regulatory body and the standards that are set by the regulators are different, and it's set statewide, not on a federal level. So we're all working with different things, but it's so right to say that the utility industry is risk adverse for some good reasons, and then some that can be challenged, but precedent is very important to us. And in that respect, we always look to our neighbors. Who's doing this, who has a good example to follow, let's talk to them. And any individual person working at the utility like me, I have a set of contacts at the at other utilities that is not comprehensive. So I go searching. So the communication that each utility puts out on what they're doing and what's commonly available is very important. So right now, working in sustainability at APS, we're considering what information on our transition do we want to have available for people, for our industry who are looking to get answers and to follow or to work with us. And that's kind of just beginning, that transparency piece in this area. And that's like a low-hanging fruit thing. We have to get that ready internally, put that out there, so that then we can get into real collaborations across utilities and working with different utilities. We don't have to invent the wheel every time. But then again, we're working in an area with decarbonization that it's very much uncharted territory for us as a nation in the utility space. So it's a little bit of everything at the moment.
And Michael, we're kind of bouncing around a bunch of different topics, but it all sort of goes into this frame about how decarbonization efforts are getting addressed, pulled together, and realized. So we've got, we're establishing, we've got processes for finding the technologies you need. We've got processes for figuring out how to get involved with key stakeholders, including your residents, your regulators, and the people you answer to. But Angel said something about how the the investors are kind of some of the most important stakeholders there. Socially conscious investing. I think someone in the chat said ESG investing, which is a term I just learned. It very much plays an important part of this. But like, how does that interaction generally work in a way that's like proactive, that isn't also just begging for money?
Well, I think that there's a few aspects to that question, and I'm going to try to address each one of them. I'd like to talk about, from what I heard, how do these projects get funded? And I know that we've talked a bit about various stakeholders, and I'll give special attention to investors since we haven't talked about them yet. And then from there, I think it'll be easy to talk about how these things ultimately get funded. So as you mentioned correctly, Dylan, investors are one of the key stakeholders and part of how decisions get made. And that can be through our board. That can be through meetings with our debt holders. It can be with credit rating agencies. ESG is something that factors into people's credit ratings. So that's a strong motivator right there. It certainly, impacts the valuation of your stock. If somebody can look at various utility stocks and see that all things equal, this one has a better ESG score than another, people are going to put their money there, seeing more sustainable returns for the longer term. So when it comes to investors, I think that sort of just comes back to, whatever we do as a utility needs to create value for people on multiple fronts. And the investor is one of them. So let's talk about the investor. The investors need to earn a return on their capital. Otherwise, they're not going to keep their capital in the utility. And nobody wants a capital-starved utility limping around trying to keep poles and wires up. It's not a good situation. So you have to demonstrate returns just like any other business. You have to create value for your customers as well. They need to get a good price on electricity. They need to have infrastructure installed that is prudent and well optimized. So these are the ways that we create value for different organizations or individuals and stakeholder groups in our communities. And that the investors are important, but I really think that it's just about running a good business, earning good returns is how you keep investors happy. And also, can't disregard the importance of listening to your investors as well. It's not as if money and the return is the only thing they care about. They care about how you're earning that return as well, which is why things like corporate social responsibility in portfolios and in investment decisions have become so important. So if you can come up with value generating proposals that you can show will have a positive impact for customers, that will create value essentially for customers, you've got a good part of the formula there. The next thing you need your regulators to understand what it is you're trying to do. So that's really just an engagement process. If you can explain that you're creating value for customers and you are doing it prudently, ideally saving money, there's not a lot of things to push back on there, but that takes work as well. Sometimes you're going to come up with a business case that maybe on the face of it is not value creating. Like it just looks like, oh, we can't make money on it, but there might be a sustainability value that is not quantified, that is of valuable to the state, to the city, to some other entity. Well, if you can bring that stakeholder who gets value from, let's just say in Houston, we have a bad air quality problem. Bad air quality means new businesses can't move into the region because we just have a ceiling on what kinds of business and how many of them we can accept in the region. So there's economic value in driving down emissions in the region. So if you can find the stakeholders who see that value and get them to be part of the solution, then even when you have a trickier green project, you can find a consortium of stakeholders who together can realize the value. And oftentimes when you pull those people in, they're pretty happy to be pulled in because this would not have gotten done if you hadn't put together the coalition to get it done. And it's certainly something that they weren't going to do on their own. So I feel like it's just that we're sort of going over the same theme. Stakeholder engagement is super important. Prudent planning and business case development to ensure that you're using those ratepayer dollars judiciously is a key part of the formula. And then, Angel said it a number of times in her remarks, and I can't stress enough how important it is that you create, maintain, and cultivate this common vision, because it's the common vision of something, right? Right now we're talking about green projects, we're talking about greenhouse gas reduction. If you can get people united behind a common vision, then all the stakeholder conversations have an anchor that you can attach to direct motivation, vision towards a common purpose.
I think that's right. That was really really well said, Michael. Before we move on from the stakeholder conversation, I know we're running low on time here, but but we got a question from the audience that kind of that ties into all this, and I'll open the floor. So how could utilities collaborate with academic or public research institutions to leverage their R&D capabilities to advance decarbonization technology? Omaya, are you guys doing that in Arizona?
We are doing that, but I am not involved in that, so I can't really speak to that directly yet. But it's a huge pool from which to pull information from, and I mean, we have our universities right here, and I can't give a specific example for how to do this uniquely. So I'm going to pass that on to the other panelists.
Well, Michael and I both have nonprofits that are focused on environment, so I think we have another idea. Michael?
Well, I've got certainly things that I can talk about, but you say your idea.
My idea. Another way for universities and the academic community to get involved is to get involved in environmental research projects that are in these environmental foundations and or nonprofits like the ones like Evolve Houston or the Gulch Foundation, where your research is directly funneled and in collaborating with utilities in the same foundation, right? Where folks are, it's a perfect platform really to bring about that community, all of the elements of the community that I talked about, and adding in, adding in your academic community into that space is what's going to drive your results around targeted efforts that utilities can pinpoint from direct research on climate. Things like carbon burying or I mean, there's so many different research projects out there around how really to address decarbonization. I think that's a platform that really lends itself well to the marriage of the intellectual society and the folks who are getting it done. Michael, do you want to add to that? Did I say it bad?
Yeah, no, that's really good. Yeah, and certainly with the Evolve Houston example, we have the University of Houston is one of the founding members. And I guess I kind of take it for granted just because we've been working on this together so long. It would have seemed obvious to me, but so University of Houston got involved early with Evolve Houston. And so they're working just like I've been talking about on a common vision, common roadmap. And so because they're in this conversation with the utility, it seems like there's no end of ways that we can work together with the University of Houston. Some of them are tied to Evolve Houston, some of them aren't. So we're working with them on a project to anticipate outages before they happen. That's not even related to Evolve Houston, but it just came out of the work we did together. With electric vehicles, it's ridiculous. So we just bring them our questions, and there's also just like crazy free things that universities can do because they have this captive population of young people who are great to study. They have the ability to do experiments at almost no cost. I mean, you could go, if you wanted to research usage on electric vehicles, you could throw a few power cords out in a garage, tell students that they're there and see if anybody connects. You pretty soon know if you have any electric vehicles and whether or not anybody wants to plug in. So there's a lot of things that you can do. My advice to any university that was wanting to get involved and help utilities, what you really need to do is you need to find a champion who understands the value to be gained out of collaborating with the university. And then ideally you would want to set up some sort of platform So the platform could just be a program or a statement of a vision that you share in common with the utility, and that becomes your reference point for an ongoing conversation about how you work together on that thing.
I'll just add on to that a little bit, and that I think in my experience, everyone that I know coming from university as professors or as students are eager to get involved with this question. They're eager to get involved with utilities. They recognize the impact that utilities have in our world, and really the infrastructure that needs to be addressed, like that, beating down the door, even really about how to get involved. Where can they plug in, for not to be really lame, but where can they plug in?
Yeah. Thank you both for that. I've just all three of you have really given a clear picture of where things are going and what can be done to get there better and faster. Because I'll say, going into this, I had a thought, and I've mentioned this to you before we got on, that like I was concerned about how the framing of this sort of is the idea that, well, why are we making a business case to solve an existential threat? Why is the conversation about monetizing climate change? But the way that you've laid this out really shows that my framing of that framing was incorrect. It's not about why, it's about how, because this is the reality of where we are, and a lot of good can be done if you manage it smartly and communicate effectively. And I think that's sort of my biggest takeaway from what we've gotten here, and I want to thank you all for that. So before we head out, I want to give everyone a chance to give sort of a call to action. That what do you think that utilities like need to do now for their own future and for ours? Angel, we'll start with you, because I'm positive you have something.
Man, I have so much. Utilities, where we can do better, where we can improve our situation, is we can get more integrated. We can recognize who our stakeholders are and keep them top of mind. We can communicate across those stakeholders regularly and transparently with accurate data. And we can put the pedal to the metal, because we no longer are in a place where we have the luxury of, or even the option of the pace that utilities have often traversed. We have to get faster, get more articulate, get more transparent, and get more communicative and more collaborative across our communities. That is the thing that is gonna move the needle. At a minimum, we need to align on goals. I recognize that different stakeholders have different inputs, but as a management consultant, that's my job, right? As I spend a lot of time helping people align on viewpoints and create visions, and then drive to those visions, execute to those visions, and do so in a measured way. This is not an insurmountable problem. It's simply a matter of everybody recognizing that, from the consumer, the power consumer, all the way up to the power executive or the power investor, we all have the same goals in mind. We simply need to talk about it and come up with some clarity on path, and then execute.
Thank you. And Michael, what do you want to see?
Well, I'm tempted to just use the whole of my time to put an exclamation point on what Angel just said. I can reiterate the things, but I think Angel said it all. It starts with a vision and people. When we say that there are profitable green projects out there, that's not to imply that it's easy. It's not. These are complex conversations. These are complex problems. But all of that is made easier when you can come up with a shared vision and stakeholders who commonly buy in and engage in conversations directed towards achieving that goal. So if you can get that, then I think that you're half of the way there. And I think that the fact that we are having conversations at this level today shows that this is where we still need to get to. We need this common vision. We need these stakeholders convening around that vision. And if we can do that, then I think that we can find the green projects and the business cases that can make us successful.
Thank you, Michael. And Amaya, take us home.
So I guess I can just top that off of like, what an awesome time to be in the utility industry, right? So 50 years ago it was about electrification. Now it's about, you know, combating climate change, a global problem, and changing our technologies to do that. It's awesome to be here. And I think when it comes to having a vision that we all share, I think we already have it. And I think that just with the collaboration, just need to understand that with collaboration, we will come up with better solutions that any of us could have done so individually. So let's just do it. I'll leave it.
Agree. We should. Yeah, let's just do it. This is a much more positive panel than I thought when I was told we were doing a climate change panel. So yeah, I want to thank you all for that. Amaya, Michael, Angel, you've been wonderful, and just really happy that we were able to have this conversation together at ETS. So for everyone else, stick around. In about 5 minutes, we're going to be doing the fireside chat, powering through Xcel Energy's approach to clean energy, EVs, and COVID-19. But until then, get yourself a water, get yourself a coffee, stretch, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.